Hey there, Carlo here from AYCB, and today I'm going to be showing you how to play the Grand Carnival. This is a polyomino game where you are building your own fairground. You're going to be basically planning the layout of your carnival, adding attractions, and moving guests around to kind of take advantage of the attractions that you have. So stick around for a few minutes and let me show you how to play. Each player gets a player board with 8 action pawns of the matching color. 5 of those action pawns remain next to these 5 action slots on the player's board, while the other 3 can be set aside for now in a personal supply. Each player also starts with 2 guests, 1 on each entry space. Now set up the rail yard by revealing a face-up foundation tile on each space from the numbers 2 through 5. Each time you play, you'll shuffle a deck of 14 Tricks of the Trade cards, and you'll deal out 3 cards for that game. The remaining cards will not be used. Finally, you'll just randomly determine the starting player and you're ready to go. Note that there are a different number of these Carnival Barker pawns as well as attraction tiles available depending on the player count, so just be sure to follow the setup instructions carefully. So the Grand Carnival plays over the course of 7 rounds, or 7 days. Each round, each player will get 5 turns, so you get a total of 35 turns in the game. And at the end of the 7th round, the player with the most points wins. On your turn, you start by first placing one of your action pawns on one of these action spaces from 1 to 5. This will determine the effectiveness of the action you'll be taking, with the higher numbers providing better options. Let's say I go with the number 3. Next, I'd choose which action to take. In the Grand Carnival, you only ever have 3 options as seen here on your player board. Place a foundation, build an attraction, or move a guest. To place a foundation tile, simply take a tile from a rail yard space that is up to your action number. In this case, since I went with a number 3 action, I can take the 3 tile here, the 2 here, or one of the face-down tiles on the 1 spots. Place the tile face-up on any empty space on your player board. Note that these construction sites, represented by these mallet symbols, must always be oriented so the mallets are right side up like the ones on your board. Foundation tiles can never be rotated, and they'll only ever have either these green walkway spaces or the construction sites. If you took a face-up tile, slide the remaining tiles from right to left to fill in the empty spaces, and refill the empty slot with a new tile. If you took a face-down tile on one of these 1 spots, you may choose to recycle the rail yard by discarding all remaining face-up tiles and revealing 4 new ones from these stacks. Next up is building an attraction. The size of the attraction, indicated by this number here, can be up to the number of the action pawn you chose. So again, if we had gone with a number 3 action, we could either take a size 1, 2, or 3 attraction. Immediately place the attraction on your fairground on construction sites shown on the foundation tiles. Attractions can never be built on walkways, entry spaces, over other attractions, or on the large mallets found directly on the player board itself. Keep in mind these attraction tiles can be rotated and flipped in any direction. The third and final action you can take on your turn is to move a guest. And again, this just applies to the number on the action space you took. So if I took the number 3, I can take one of my guests and move that guest 3 adjacent spaces. You cannot split the movement between 2 guests. Guests can only move on the green walkways. When I say move adjacent, I mean left, right, above, or below. They cannot move diagonally. Also, guests cannot move into or through spaces with other guests or carnival barkers. If a guest ends their movement adjacent to an attraction, place 1 ticket on any empty space of each adjacent attraction. For example, if my guest stopped here, I would only place a ticket on this attraction as this one here is diagonal. However, if my guest stopped here, each of these attractions would gain a ticket. And remember, the ticket can go on any spot of that attraction as long as the total number of tickets on the attraction does not exceed its size. So for example, a size 4 attraction can hold 4 tickets. A couple more notes about guests. First off, they cannot move through the sides of your carnival, but they can move to the big top at the back here from any of those top spaces. Once a guest reaches the big top, they stop moving for the rest of the game and will no longer place tickets. There's no limit to the number of guests that can be in the big top. After resolving a move a guest action, if both your entry spaces here are empty, you must first refill your entry spaces with 1 guest each, and then you must also add a Carnival Barker pawn to any empty walkway space on your fairground. If you have no empty walkways, the Barker remains in the supply. For the rest of the game, whenever you move a guest, you get 1 extra movement point for each Barker in your carnival. However, just like other guests, Barkers block your other guests' movement and they do not visit attractions. As I mentioned before, you only get 5 turns per round, so keep in mind you can only use those numbered action spaces here once each per round. Now let's take a look at the tricks of the trade cards. So these cards offer some variety from game to game, allowing players ways to bend the rules by completing specific goals that are shown on the top half of these cards. After you complete any action, check to see if you've completed any of these goals. If you did, take one of your 3 action pawns that you had set aside at the start and place it on any of those cards whose objectives you met that turn. Going forward, you've now unlocked that trick of the trade, and you can use that ability on the bottom for the rest of the game. For example, practice your ballyhoo requires you to move 2 guests past the halfway point of your fairground. Once you've done that, your guests can move diagonally for the rest of the game. For Ticket Trap, you need to end a guest's movement adjacent to 3 attractions. If so, going forward you can split the number on your action pawn between 2 attractions when building, for example using a number 5 action to build a size 2 and a size 3 attraction. Once any player has successfully unlocked a trick of the trade, each other player in the game has to meet that same objective on their very next turn, otherwise they lose the opportunity to unlock that trick of the trade for the rest of the game. As a reminder, place 1 action pawn from each other player next to the card. At the end of each other player's next turn, if they do not meet that goal, they'll be locked out of that trick, and you can just return that action pawn to the box. Any player who does meet the goal on their next turn gains access to it the same way as the first player. The rulebook explains all tricks of the trade cards in detail. At the end of a round, players simply clear their action pawns off their 5 numbered spaces, then the starting player token passes to the next player in turn order, and the round marker moves to the next day of the week, and then you'll just start over again taking your 5 actions. If instead it was the end of the 7th round, in other words, Saturday, the end of the week, the game would end and players would add up the points to see who wins. So you'll score points in the following ways. You get points for having sets of 3, 4, or 5 of the same attraction size. For example, if you have 4 of the size 4 attractions, that's 18 points. Each attraction in a set must have at least 1 ticket in order to score. Score 22 points if your carnival has at least 1 attraction of each size from 1 to 5. Again, each one must have at least 1 ticket. At the end of the game, 1 guest in the big top gets you 3 points, 2 gets you 6 points, 3 gets you 10, and 4 or more will get you a maximum of 15 points. Score 12 points if you have at least 15 total tickets in your carnival. 14 tickets is worth 0, and any number above 15 is still just 12 flat points. The orange carnival barkers are worth 3 points each. Finally, minus 1 point for each visible mallet symbol, whether it's a big empty space on your board or the construction sites on the foundation tiles. And the player with the most points wins. If there's a tie, the player who completed the most tricks of the trade wins. If there's still a tie, then the player whose carnival has the most tickets on the attractions wins. And if it's still tied, then players must share the victory. That's how you play the Grand Carnival. Keep in mind there's also a solo mode in here, which is described in the rulebook. It just uses a slightly different scoring system, but otherwise that's all you need to know to play the Grand Carnival. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing and or telling a friend about us. Otherwise, that's it for me, and thanks for watching.